This is What's Left America, and I'm Chris Tritico.
I'm Andy Georgeson.
I'm James Campbell.
And I'm Chris Bell.
What's Left America is produced by Left Out Media and brought to you by the generosity of our sponsors and friends just like Poppy Massey and hopefully someday friends like you. Before we get started, Andy, I want to ask you, what's it like being a part-time resident?
Of the United States?
Yeah. Where are you in the world?
Pretty good.
Where are you in the world right now?
Yeah. Well, if I remember correctly, I am in the Bavarian Alps. A couple of days ago, I was on Lake Como. I might have this in some sort of reverse chronological order, but the combination of a lot of champagne and other cocktails, super good, rich food, first class accommodations. I'm not really sure what the fuck I am.
Well, let me ask you this.
Right now,
Are they loving us more and more over there in Europe these days?
No, they are not. I can confirm. I can confirm that. Oh my gosh, no, we're not doing well over here based on my informal surveys.
Well, you speak more than one language, right? Are you speaking a foreign language when you're over there, or their language?
Yeah, das kann ich.
All right,
you don't know what I said. Okay,
I don't know.
The show.
I don't know what you said,
but it's great for our German audience.
That's right. Both of them. Today on the show, we're going to cover these important topics: escape to hell, lies, tweets, and dishonor. How low can you go? Trump's trade wars. I shouldn't have written that. Are we winning yet? And non-criminal Republicans. And of course, we're going to finish the show as always with out of left field. So let's get started right now. Escape to hell. They came here just looking to get away from war and strife and in crime in their home countries. Brought their families, their children, asking to come into this country like people have done since this country started. It's been the foundation of the country that we let immigrants in, and under the Trump administration, they arrested them under a zero tolerance policy and separated parents from the children. We've been talking about this for the last several weeks. The administration reversed its zero tolerance policy of separating parents from children and prosecuting the parents, and said they would reunite the adults with the children. And recently, a federal judge ordered that any child under 5 be put back together with the parents by this coming Tuesday, which will be about 2 days from today when we tape. This is Sunday. And it's 105 kids. Only 105 kids. Now, the administration said when they announced this, it'll be easy to put these parents back together. I believe the person from the administration who testified before Congress said, all I have to do is hit 2 keystrokes on the computer. I can put these kids back together with their family. Now they're saying not only is it up to 3,000 kids total, they don't know where the parents of these 105 kids are. Some of them have been deported. We don't know. We're having to do DNA testing to get them back.
And how can you have such low regard, such little regard for human beings that you would create this system that we've talked ad nauseum on the show about how cruel it is and how ridiculous it is and how they were doing it for political purposes and trying to use the kids as bait, but then to have such little regard for humanity that you wouldn't even make sure when you were going to do this that you could put the families back together.
Right.
To get to the point where you have to do DNA testing to reunite families, and that's, I would think, not a very simple process.
Well,
so it's an
Chris
absolute nightmare.
Go ahead, Andy.
Chris Bell, my thought when, at the idea that with 2 keystrokes we can do this, it'll be no problem, piece of cake. At this point, I know that anything that the administration says that they can do, they really, I don't believe it, and why should anyone believe it? How well do you think the just using DNA to reunite parents is going to go? They've already deported a certain number of the parents. They've got a certain number of children that they're supposed to reunite with parents, but they don't know who belongs to whom. How are they going to know who needs a DNA test and who doesn't need a DNA test? How are they going to find the parents in Mexico? They can't even keep up with the kids in the United States. This is ridiculous.
Exactly.
It's ridiculous and it's sad.
Andy, that's exactly right. And here's the thing that galls me the most. James, they deported parents back to their home country while their children are still here in custody in the United States.
Right. So
because they didn't know who they had. They didn't know who had parents. They're not listening. They didn't know who had children. They're not listening to the parents. They're doing mass hearings. They knew they couldn't keep track. They didn't care. And I feel like we can deplore the situation, the morality of it, the disregard for these people's humanity, but I can't help thinking how we're going to look back on this time in American life.
Thank you, James.
There's
You're doing fine.
James, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Tritico has this
Don't
little
let me cut
trick that he
anyone off.
does. Sometimes when he wants to get one of us to talk, he'll say our name.
Andy,
We appreciate you
Chris,
completely disregarding
I
that.
Andy, your
I
take
can't hear when
is
more than one person is talking.
your
So
take
I
is
just-
completely legitimate. So, have you finished?
I'm done. Thank you, James. Please go ahead. I don't want to cut anyone off.
Okay, all right. So, Chris, this is a delusional Trump policy. It's easy to break something, and they broke something, and they have no process to put it back together. Furthermore, when they talk about reunifying families, ICE basically doesn't have the facilities to really reunite these families because they're already nearly at capacity. They're under 3,000 beds available. They're talking about putting these kids in a detention center in Port Aransas where they keep men. It's not even fit for families or women. It's for men. And so they basically have 20 days to put together families for kids that are older than 5 years old. And they can't reach that number because they have no process. But here's the thing that's striking to me. It was a University of Texas Tribune poll showed that 83% of the state Democrats registered to vote said separating children and parents who are apprehended trying to enter, they are against it. But among Republicans, 46% of them supported it, and only 35% opposed it. Here's a more striking thing. GOP women opposed the separation of kids and families by 42%, but 37%, support this. And so you still have this critical mass of Republicans, over 80%, who basically are okay with this policy. But that says something about us morally.
You're assuming that the administration cares about a poll that opposes a policy that they want to use.
Well, they overturned their own policy as a result of what polling was showing and how the American people were responding. They certainly didn't find it out of the goodness of their hearts that they were suddenly going to reverse course.
We're talking about how to fix a problem because they have no process. But the reason they're in this situation is not because they have no process to put it back together. The reason we're in this situation is they had no process in the beginning. It's very simple. This is Juan Valdez and his wife Betty and their 2 children. Put them on a log somewhere and list where they're going.
Well,
Is that so damn hard?
Chris, that would have been a great idea had they thought about that from the get-go. But that was no thinking about how they were going to do this. All they were doing it for was to please a base of people and to show that they were doing something about these people who are entering.
Well, Chris, Chris
when we
Critico,
move Juan, put it on the list.
But look, you practice criminal law, and I used to practice a lot of criminal law, and I don't remember any of my clients ever getting lost in the jail. I mean, they usually, when I went to court, if they were in jail,
They showed up.
They were brought to the courthouse.
Yeah.
There are systems where you
They
can
knew where they
organize
were.
people.
Yeah. So basically, they did this to make a point. Basically, if they had just maintained the Obama administration policy of keeping families together, this might have not been so bad. But they broke it. They decided we're going to do like they do with most Obama policies. They're basically going against the grain, trying to get rid of
And
it.
if I could just throw this in, and I'll probably throw it in again as we do this for the next 10, 20 years. But business people run for office.
I thought presidents only had 8 years.
We're not done with him yet.
Business people run for office, and they always say, let a businessman run things. It's going to be so much better. And as since I was in politics, I would tell people, if I was going to go get heart surgery, I wouldn't go and say, hey, do you have anyone here who's never done heart surgery before? Because that's my guy.
Give me a podiatrist.
Lawyers, people don't go, hey, can you find me someone who never tried a case, doesn't even know his way around? So it doesn't always work out because politics is different and government is different.
Yes.
And a lot of time business people run and they have absolutely no idea about governing whatsoever, and this is an absolutely great example.
We alluded to this last week when we were talking about the American people seem to be fatigued with politicians. And so they're basically saying this woman is successful in business, so therefore they can be successful in government, when clearly we know that's not true.
Can I get that? But so many of the professionals in government have fled under this administration because they just can't take it. They can't take the embarrassment of working for this administration.
Right.
And so whoever came up with this plan probably did so from a political standpoint and not from a managerial standpoint, and so it's turned into an absolute nightmare.
Let me just one final question on this, because then we got to move on. But one final question, Andy, I'm going to bring you back in here. We're almost out of time on this, so no filibustering. But this is 105 of the 3,000 kids that they're stuck on. What is going to happen when some federal judge says, by the way, there's 2,900 other kids that I'm now ordering you to put back with their parents in the next 20 days. Then what's going to happen?
It's not going to happen. Chris Bell made a great point about people are tired of politics and they don't want politicians in. But I don't think that is exactly what the problem is here, because I think that my 11-year-old son could probably do better in this administration. Trump doesn't know what he's doing in business. You made that point last week, Chris Turtico. I didn't have a chance to be on the podcast. I was on my travels. You said that I like billionaires who've never filed for bankruptcy. That's the point. The president is incompetent. He's incompetent at brain surgery, business, government. He's not good at anything. So it's obviously it's not going to happen. My fear is that the focus is going to move on before the problem gets solved. And all of these problems are just becoming more and more entrenched.
All right, let's move on. Lies, tweets, and dishonor. How low can you go? And we see this every week, and that's why I wanted to do this again this week. The administration just seems to go lower and lower and lower every week, and we're just going to talk about a few different things. And here's the first question, James Campbell. Does openly lying every week, every day, aid or help our republic? Does it help our country?
Absolutely not. So this is something that we have gotten used to. And the question is,
we can't get used to this.
No, my point is, this is something that we have gotten used to because the news media will report that, Chris. And so we know that he's lying. He uses Fox News, for instance, to say anything he wants. It doesn't have to be factual. But I just want to point to a piece that Lily Loughborough wrote in Slate magazine last month. And the title of it was "The Facts Are Disappearing. It's up to us to save them." And basically what she says is Trump lies become the truth in his base because he repeats them and repeats them and repeats them, and they start to believe that. And so she suggests that we do the same thing on the other side. She wants us to adopt these facts and repeat them to friends, to the media. Basically, anywhere you can say the truth against what he's saying, that's how you combat it. She also says you need to post these facts somewhere in public every day. Well, let me finish. Like this show, we try to be as factual as we can. You got 3 reporters, former reporters who are participating in this show. Chris, you're a lawyer. Basically, your truth is the facts. You can't go to court and tell a lie. And so, we have to continue to tell the truth. She also says we need to broadcast our truth, our facts every day. And then lastly, she says, rinse and repeat. And I agree with that, because if Trump continues to tell lies about the Obama birther conspiracy, about the Obama administration, about Korea, North Korea, we basically have to continue to correct that, even though it may seem elementary. Unless we do that, nobody else is going to do it.
How do you do that?
But they did do it with the refugee and the immigrant issue. They did do that because he immediately tried to put this off and say this was a result of Obama policies. And every time I heard a news story on it, if they said anything about that, they would immediately correct it and say that's not the truth. And so you basically have to do that. But the media has got to be willing to push back to a certain degree, or this is just going to keep getting worse and worse.
I think the media does push back, but the problem is Trump has this megahorn of Twitter, and he has Fox News. Fox News is the #1 rated cable news show in the country.
So there are two things here. Let's start with Fox News, which you go back decades, and now it's been around that long. But it's always been a propaganda machine, and it's long been said that the most effective propaganda is the propaganda that people don't realize is actually propaganda. They see it as something real. And so a lot of people take Fox News as being entirely real, and we've seen changes with friends and colleagues and the things that your folks are quoting to you, and then you dig down a little deeper and you find out where that came from. And it's Fox News. So it's played its role for a long, long time. But now you have
a president who endorses it.
Well,
every day.
You have him endorsing it, but you also have a president who does have that huge Twitter following. And so what he has done has kind of changed the rules, but it's somewhat horrifying because I just want to tell you, the other day I was involved in a case with a guy who, good guy, smart guy, has business guy. I'm not going to go into the details of the case, obviously, but had worked with him, met his family, all solid. And after everything was said and done, and we're talking outside the courthouse, he was telling me about some other case he was involved in and something that appeared on CNN. And he said, I don't really listen to them because that's fake news. And I was like, when it hits that close to home, where someone you've been dealing with and you think that you recognize is certainly intelligent and raising a family, believes that shit, that really scares the hell out of me.
So let me ask you, Andy. Let me bring you in here. In addition to that, last week we had this shooting at the Capitol Gazette, and have all these dead and injured reporters at the Capitol Gazette. The mayor of the city wrote a letter to the president and to the governor of the state asking to lower the flags to half-mast. Now, to lower flags half-mast, it has to be a proclamation from the governor of the state, and to lower the national flag, the president has to approve it. The president initially rejected the request. He has approved the lowering of the flags to half-mast several times in his presidency and initially rejected this request. He later approved it, but initially rejected it.
The president is not making a secret of how he feels about the mainstream media. He does not care for the press. The first lady obviously doesn't care for the press. She's got the jacket to prove it. The problem is, I agree with everything that's been set up to now about combating lies with facts. The problem is, it's easy to make up a lie, and you can say whatever you want. You don't have to do any research. You don't really have to think about it. You don't even have to be consistent in these current days with the lie. You don't have to just stick to your lie. We used to say when I was growing up, get your lie straight, right? That means if you tell a lie, you got to remember the lie you told and all the lies you told to support it. But this administration doesn't have to do that, and more people are finding out. Anyone who speaks for the president or supports the president can just basically say whatever they want, and whoever comes up with the best lie, that'll be repeated. The other thing that I've noticed personally, and I'm sure you guys have noticed too, you can't fight once somebody decides that they support this president and this is a good deal for them, or for whatever reason they think that the current president is a good president. You don't change their mind by telling them the facts. And while the press is running around doing the research to back up the case that what the president just said is not true, and this tweet that took him 30 seconds to write is false, he's moved the chess piece or the checker piece to another square.
Right. Moved on.
By just coming up with a different lie. So I feel very discouraged about the way things are going in regard to dealing with the press and facts.
In Montana this week, in the never-ending presidential campaign, the president attacked George H.W. Bush, former president, 94 years old, the 41st president. He's 94. He attacked the 1,000 points of light. He attacked John McCain on his deathbed, and he took aim at the Me Too movement, all in one rally, rally in Montana. Yeah. And that's about as low as it gets, in my view. George H.W. Bush and the 1,000 points of light. You may not agree with George H.W. Bush administration. You may not agree with his politics. But what the 1,000 points of light, what's wrong with that, I can't possibly understand.
It was all established to encourage volunteerism. It's still there's a 1,000 points of light, this foundation that still exists to this day. All these years later,
take a shot at a 94-year-old man.
Yeah,
who just buried his wife.
Yeah, just buried his wife.
But this is. I read a letter today, and it really pointed out what's happening. We are in the midst of a dangerous personality cult. And people show up at these rallies to basically see the president, but they really want to see a celebrity. And so basically what you have are people who believe that Trump is on their side, that he's for them, Chris.
But they're applauding this stuff.
I get that. Because, as I said, we're in the grips of a dangerous personality cult.
And we're also going to talk here in a minute about how the fact that it's complete bullshit from an economic standpoint.
I'm not arguing that at all. So, but when you talk about demeaning people like George Bush and John McCain, people who were clearly, heroes in this country and respected by many. Those people, most of them are Republicans and probably supported John McCain in the presidential race and George Bush. But now you have a guy who's a personality, who's a celebrity, that basically when he shows up and starts his clown show, they basically believe all that. And so all bets are off when it comes to respecting anything, Chris.
I'm offended by that rally and the things that he said at that rally, but I've been offended by a lot of the things
Everybody's
that he said.
aghast by that craziness.
No, that's the problem.
That's the problem.
That's
not everybody.
That's why he's doing the clown show. They love it. They eat it up.
No, everybody is aghast by that. I think people of good civic mind and good hearts are aghast by that craziness.
Why does he have a 42% approval rating?
Yeah,
because
that's crazy.
Again, we're in the grips of a personality cult. I mean, this guy's basically a celebrity, and people.
But at least more than 50% think he's racist.
Go ahead, Andy.
Well, I just James.
Andy, you don't think he's racist, though, do you?
Say what?
You don't think Donald Trump is racist, do you?
That is negative. I actually do think he's racist, Chris Bell.
That wasn't really intended to be a stumper.
So listen, James Campbell is a good-hearted person. He's got the best soul of any person I've ever met. That's why he thinks that all people are aghast at this. Or he doesn't think the people that come to the Trump rally are actually people. But no, unfortunately, everyone is not aghast at this. And but I understand where you're coming from, James, because we've been talking for weeks about all of these issues, and we've been talking for more than a year about how did this president win. None of us can get our heads around it. We think that, the people that we know that have an ounce of sense should be, and are frustrated about this. But there are plenty of people like Chris Bell met at the courthouse who have fancy degrees and seem like normal people and two arms and two legs.
That's the frightening thing, because he does have an ounce of sense, and he's believing this crap.
You can't figure it out. It's a puzzle that, wrapped in an enigma, surrounded by, I don't know, donut jelly. I don't know. I can't figure it out.
Well said. All right, let's move on. Trump's trade wars. I didn't realize I was writing a tongue twister. Are we winning yet?
Yeah, that's your third tongue twister.
I know. I can't say
we're going to lose big on this. I'm very concerned. I cannot explain trade. I'm looking for somebody else to explain it to me. But I know that this is a subtle art, and you don't make a move before. That's why we have a World Trade Organization, which Trump wants to leave. Maybe he's already left. I've been in Europe for a while. I haven't kept up so well. But he is not interested in working well with our allies, and he wants to go it alone in everything. And now he is just moving pieces all over the board. He doesn't have any idea what he's doing, and he doesn't know what the outcome is going to be. And just like I said 2 or 3 weeks ago, there are a lot of people who voted for him who are going to be hurt by some of the consequences of these willy-nilly trade decisions. Yet I don't think it's going to hurt him at the polls. I don't understand it.
Well,
please explain it to me.
Well, that's going to remain to be seen. So since taking office, Donald Trump has jumped all over NAFTA, destroyed that, jumped all over the European Union. Harley Davidson, who he was propping up as one of the big benefits of the United States, has announced they're moving operations out of the country to save from retaliatory tariffs that are going to be imposed by the European Union. And in an odd twist, the auto tariffs that are going to be imposed on the United States are going to hurt American workers from the very states that heavily supported Donald Trump. And so what you were just talking about, Andy, we may see some uptick in Democratic votes at the polls in the midterm if that actually happens. I just saw a report yesterday that a producer, the biggest producer of nails in the United States, is going to close their doors. They've lost 50% of their revenue since the retaliatory steel tariffs were put on the United States by the European Union. And so you're starting to see a change economically in the United States as a result of this trade war.
Well, and everybody still remembers James Carville, it's the economy, stupid.
Right.
And it's not just the economy, stupid, it's your own personal economy and what you see happening in your own backyard.
Right. That's what affects the polls.
Exactly. And that's where he may have really overstepped, because all of this seems to be is being done with absolutely no regard for the base. As you pointed out, the states that he carried handily are being significantly impacted, and we'll see. And I'll bring this up. Thomas Frank, who we should try to have as a guest on our show sometime, who wrote "What's the Matter with Kansas,"
great
which
idea.
You could basically just cross out Kansas and write in Texas. But he was early in on finding out, kind of identifying a lot of things that drove the move toward the right. And it was very interesting, because as far as like labor's move from the to the left, to the right, from the Democratic Party, the Republican Party. A lot of it, he pointed out, was they never agreed with the Democratic Party on social issues, but they always felt like the Democratic Party had their back on economic issues. And when the Democratic Party started throwing in with big business, his viewpoint was they kind of saw it as, well, now you don't even have our back on our pocketbook issues, and we never agree with you on social issues, so we're going to start voting Republican. But in this case, if they start realizing this has been a big charade, and also see that not only is he not helping, but he's hurting, there really may be some recoiling at the ballot
The
box.
U.S. Chamber of Commerce, James Campbell, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce came out last week against the tariffs that Donald Trump is imposing. And the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, historically, as everyone knows, is a conservative organization.
Absolutely. It's pro-business, and I think they are rightly concerned about the policies that are the stuff that Trump writes on a napkin in a restaurant that he calls a policy. And, I look at NAFTA 2.0, and Mexico just elected a president, Lopez Obrador, who basically is going to now, who's a leftist, as everybody knows, who they're basically, Trump is going to have to deal with a guy who's a populist like himself and try to renegotiate NAFTA. And, oh, by the way, American soybean farmers sell a lot of soybeans to Mexico, and I don't think that this new leftist president is gonna bow down to Donald Trump. And so you have some trouble on the horizon, Chris Tritico. And as you said earlier, it remains to be seen, how this is going to play out. And I think it's going to be bad for American businesses at the end of the day.
But you called them a pro-business organization, basically almost as much as Fox News or the NRA. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce has been an arm of the Republican Party.
Right,
They have endorsed almost every Republican as long as I can remember. So this is an extraordinary step that is being taken, and will be very interesting, and kind of goes back to what I was saying last week about the fact that there's all these the so-called mainstream Republicans, which really kind of boils down to the business folks who've always been kind of the heart and soul of the Republican Party, who've been kicked to the curb. Saying we can't accept this anymore. And so I hear some chattering from Europe, but I must finish. I must finish. Foreign Service Radio coming through, and so I really see this as an incredible move. They are so partisan that I had this friend who's both Hispanic and gay, and he's a Republican. And I had to ask him one day, how could you possibly be a Republican? And he said, my first job out of college was with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I said, oh, that explains it.
Yeah. So, Andy, bringing you back in, James brought up soybean farmers, but the real problem for soybean farmers is China. John Heinsdorfer, an Iowa soybean farmer and the president of the Soybean Farmers Union, I guess, I don't know what they're called. He, in an interview, said soybeans are the top agricultural export for the United States, and China is the top market for purchasing those soybean exports. The math is simple.
Right.
You tax soybean exports at 25%, and you've done serious damage to U.S. farmers.
And we are not going to get those markets back if we lose them. That's the important statement. That's the most important statement. Once we lose those markets, whether it's soybeans or motorcycles or cheese or whatever it is, we're not going to get it back. It's the same thing with OPEC and crude oil prices. OPEC had a lock until Venezuela and Texas fracking and people, other countries in the North Sea, Mexico, started producing, and then all of a sudden they didn't have a lock, and they realized, oh my shit, if we lose these oil markets, we are never going to get them back. And all of a sudden, all this other oil was in play, and that is what's going to go on with the United States. Except instead of having smart people running the show, we've got a bunch of idiots who just seem to be grabbing levers and turning them and twisting dials and knobs, and they have no idea what they're doing.
Hey, Andy,
I can't believe I would rather have a bunch of Saudi princes running shit here than having the U.S. government in control.
Andy,
This is insane.
Andy, I have a question.
Settle down, Medea.
I have a question. Do you think those soybean farmers are a gas?
I do. Along with all the other people.
Come on, Medea.
China,
I sure do.
Well, China did retaliate with $34 billion in reciprocal tariffs. And soybean is among those, along with orange juice, whiskey, whiskey, and electric cars, among other things. So this is just starting. The president said that he would come back with additional tariffs, and I think he was saying something upwards of $200 billion.
Well, did nobody think this was going to happen? Of course they were going. I need to remind the audience, I don't always speak with such an elevated pitch, but the whole program's been about Donald Trump, and I'm finding that I'm getting my old pitch back from when Democrats were just routinely getting their ass kicked, and I was the only Democrat in the room. But no, of course, everyone said this was going to happen, and it is, and it's going to continue to happen. It's going to hurt a lot of people.
And the real problem I have with this is you've seen a resurgence in jobs. The job numbers are great, and this is really going to, I think, do have a real impact on that. I mean, this is our last question on this, but I think it's going to have a real impact on that.
The part-time job numbers are great. Full-time jobs, people are still looking for them.
But the numbers they're talking about as a result of the tariffs are huge.
Absolutely.
That's what
I'm talking about.
There are going to be a lot of people affected by this, no doubt about it.
That's what I'm talking about.
But I'm not giving them full credit for job report.
Of course
I just said the job numbers are great. I didn't give anybody credit for anything. Okay. I just said the job numbers are good.
Well, make yourself clear, brother.
I thought that was fairly clear.
Well, Chris Critico,
yes.
The job numbers are good, but I don't know. It's hard for me to believe at this point that the people who vote for Trump and the things that affect their lives, that they put any stop. I mean, like, whatever happens to them seems like they think it's a random thing, and that anything Trump does is a great thing. So there doesn't seem to be any correlation to any pain that they're suffering and the way they decide to vote. But that cannot be true, and I hope that it's not true, and that there's some consequence at the midterms this time around.
When Barack Obama,
whether there's job growth or not, there's not any wage growth.
Yes,
so
that's exactly right.
Maybe that pain will be associated with.
We got to move on. But when Barack Obama was in the White House and the job numbers were steadily growing over his term, the Republicans always said the president of the United States doesn't have anything to do with the job numbers. And so then
they accused him
of inflating it.
Right.
Now that Donald Trump is in the White House, they're saying the president has everything to do with it. Well, they can't have it both ways. So it doesn't matter to me who gets credit for it. If jobs are growing, jobs are growing. And I don't care who gets credit for it. And I can promise you that someone who hasn't had a job in 4 or 5 years, if they finally find a job and the president's tariffs cost them that job, they're going to be a little miffed. That was the only point I was trying to make. All right.
I think that's a good point.
That stands to reason.
Yeah. All right.
I think that kind of goes back to the economy's stupid.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you someone who doesn't have a job now. That would be Scott Pruitt.
Well, that's where I'm trying to move on to. If y'all would stop talking.
Good segue.
Non-criminal Republicans is our final topic of the day. With the resignation of EPA Chief Scott Pruitt, the administration ends yet another scandal-plagued stint by a department head. And then I loved this. Nicole Wallace, former White House communications director under George II, now hosts MSNBC's Deadline. And she said, quote, "The Republican Party sucks," while discussing why former Environmental Protection Agency head Scott Pruitt lasted so long in the Trump administration despite multiple scandals. Former CIA agent and 2016 independent presidential candidate Evan McMullin said over the GOP's inaction on Pruitt amid multiple controversies that Republicans excused Pruitt for being a little corrupt in quotes, because he delivered on certain policy issues at the EPA that were favored by the party as a whole. Further, he said, in Pruitt, you sort of see a mini Trump, McMullen said, arguing that some conservatives made the decision to excuse some corruption and potential alignment with Russia regarding Trump in exchange for certain policy objectives.
So I'm going to sympathize a little bit. Donald Trump was going to be a swamp drainer. I mean, he said throughout he's going to drain the swamp. But here at the studios of Left Out Media, I have a fountain out front that you all have seen, and I moved it here from my home originally, and it's always grown a lot of algae, and it gets very, very green. And it used to be that I could just take the pressure washer and clean out all that algae, and now that we've moved it to the studios of Left Out Media out front, not even the pressure washer can get rid of some of that algae. And I think that that's kind of what the Trump administration is going through. That algae in that swamp is so deep that there's not a powerful enough pressure washer, and there's not a powerful enough moral compass for anyone to say, this is fucked up.
I just think we misunderstood what he meant. I think we completely misunderstood what he meant. He did drain the swamp. He took it out of industry and brought it into the White House.
That's exactly right. So I have to borrow a phrase from that Texas philosopher, Kinky Friedman, who once quipped, how can you look at the Texas legislature and still believe in intelligent design? So I say that to say, how can you look at this group of robber barons that Trump has inserted in his administration, from Scott Pruitt to Ryan Zinke, who led a contract in Puerto Rico for $300 million for a company that had 3 employees, $300 million, to Beverly DeVos, who is connected to all kinds of corporate elite.
Or Ben Carson, the $31,000 table he knew nothing about until he did.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, it goes on and on. Scott Pruitt was the worst of them, we think. But this is the Trump administration. We should not be surprised or aghast by that, Andrea. What do you think?
I don't know. Obviously, all that's correct. But, I want to say the Democrats will also excuse a certain amount of whatever if we like the policies. And I think about Bill Clinton again.
Cut her off.
Democratic women made all kinds of...
Cut her off now.
I beg your pardon?
Go ahead.
I cannot... no, Chris Bell, was that you?
Yes.
Say what you want to say, bro, and then I'll go ahead and finish my point. I couldn't hear you.
You go ahead.
I'm just messing with you.
Go ahead and finish your point.
I couldn't understand
From
what
abroad.
the fuck you were saying. So you want to... But if you say it, then I can respond to it. But I can't... I couldn't understand you.
He was just saying cut her off.
The difference, Andy, is that in these other administrations...
Well, wait, the difference to what? I haven't finished what I was going to say.
Go ahead, finish.
So, hold on. Okay, so, everybody, each political party, major party in the United States is willing to forgive a little this or that, or make a little excuse for this or that. And Bill Clinton is one that I have on my mind lately because... he was a dog. He really was a dog. But he did what we wanted him to do, and we made up all kinds of excuses for his behavior. The difference is, and maybe this is what Chris was about to say, but I couldn't understand because more than one person was talking, is that this is just across the board. This is a level of corruption that belongs in a different country, a country that's not a first world wealthiest nation, most powerful nation on earth country, the world's first democracy and longest lasting democracy. This is not the expectation that we have here in our country. So I don't want to say that the left are perfect, but they are so over the top.
Okay. What's the difference, Chris?
Well, one thing I'd like to point out is a headline from The Onion that appeared recently that I think is fantastic. Because Andy gets very upset about how often we butt in on her, and there was this headline: "Man offended by rude female coworker continuing to speak over him after he clearly interrupted her." So I apologize, Andy. But look,
No, wait a minute. My husband sent me that one. I thought that was hilarious.
I clearly interrupted you,
Again.
and here you're speaking over me again.
So, but isn't Andy making somewhat of a point? I mean, Bill Clinton was excused for some pretty egregious conduct, wasn't he?
It happens at every We're talking about staffers here, and going back to the Reagan years, James Watt came in as the Interior Secretary and embarrassed the hell out of the administration by all of the stupid shit he was saying, and they got rid of him. And that's what has usually been the course of action. And it's happened in almost every administration when somebody comes in and they're, for whatever reason, starts doing stupid shit. You find a way to move them out the door. What's extraordinary in this administration is that if they're singing from the Trump hymn book, he just keeps them around as long as he can. And he liked the shit he was doing at EPA,
right,
destroying the climate.
And so what I thought you were going to say was Bill Clinton was not excused. He was impeached, and he won his Senate trial. So he wasn't excused in his conduct. He was actually impeached for his conduct.
Well,
and the Senate trial he won. And so
and I think progressives need to shut up about Bill Clinton. I mean, Bill Clinton he was great for Barack Obama. He made extraordinary speeches to help him both get elected and be reelected president. And I'll have a whole probably out of left field on Bill Clinton someday. And I don't see how this serves our purpose, going back and shitting on people who've been in office before.
But she wasn't crapping on him. That was a valid point.
No,
though.
that
was a valid point in that discussion.
But it would be a valid point if you talked about the Reagan administration, the Bush 1 administration, the Clinton administration.
Give her a break.
I mean, there are scandals in office, but the difference in this administration is he doesn't care.
She's 10,000 miles away again. Give her a break.
But she's been living in castles.
I did say,
yes.
Christelle, shut up for a second. Shut up. Just shut the fuck up. I said every. Both parties do it. And so, yes, everybody. I said Clinton is on my mind. And, but I was going to let it go because you're right. We said the same thing, but I'm going to go ahead and take a little extra time and add that the thing that Clinton did wrong was, and has been doing wrong, has to do with his behavior toward women. And women now have decided we don't care how well you fit in with our party, political party politics. It is not worth it to us to be abused and assaulted and raped so that we can get a better health care plan. We're going to find a guy who can do all of that, like Barack Obama, without raping, assaulting, and abusing us. That's the difference. And you could say that about whomever you want, whatever president or government or any other political leader, city council person. But Bill Clinton is the person that a lot of people have on their mind right now, and we can take him off his pedestal. We know what he did great for progressives, for the left, for Democrats, but it does not excuse his behavior. And we're just not going to do that anymore.
Hey,
we're not going to make excuses. Okay.
Andy, why do you not focus on the guy who's currently in the White House, who's admittedly talked about pussy groping?
Well, the difference between Republicans and Democrats is that Democrats are willing to look at our faults. That's why we're the better party. And we make excuses like everybody else, but there comes a point, there comes a line, and we're not going to cross that line anymore.
He's not running for office anymore, Andy.
Bill Clinton, it doesn't take anything else. It doesn't take anything away from his all the good things he did to say that he's a problem for us.
All right.
And anyway, he's over. It's over.
So let's move on. Let's move on. All right, let's move on.
Let him go.
Let's let him go.
Right on, my sister.
Let's let him go. All right.
Right on.
All right, so we're done with that.
Thank you.
Let's go move on to out of left field, as if we haven't already been there. All right. Who wants to go first?
So I'll go first. So I previewed this earlier, but I read a very eloquently written letter in the Chicago Tribune. It goes, Donald Trump's supporters believe he is on their side. We're in the grips of a dangerous personality cult. Democrats, Republicans, and independents who are rightly aghast at what Trump is doing need to more than point out his lies. They must show the people that he is not on their side. His policies on taxes, trade, health care, and the environment are designed to benefit a narrow segment of America's corporate elite and are hurting most Americans. Blue wave or not, the tide will turn only when the people understand this.
Andy, go ahead.
I'm not a big fan of Maureen Dowd, but she wrote a good column yesterday for whom the Trump trolls, which I thought was a good headline. And she's talking about Trump's addiction to Twitter, and she quoted a man by the name of Jaron Lanier, who wrote a book called 10 Arguments for Deleting Your Social Media